So my name is Matt Alexander. I'm an art school dropout, and that is the way to do it. I then got my degree in urban planning, and I live in Sudbury. I've been there for about 4 years now, most of that time without a car, which is not something that you'd normally think is possible in Sudbury. If I say Sudbury, you say Superstack, Big Nickel, Science North, Sudbury Wolves, Alex Trebek, of course. You probably don't say bike lanes. That's because we don't have a whole lot of bike lanes in Sudbury. But we're working to change that. You might have met Rochelle Niemela over the last couple of days. She's with the Sudbury Cyclists Union. This is a map of our current active transportation infrastructure. The purple lines are proper bike routes, bike lanes. The thick red line is a separated bike path. The small segments that are circled are sharrows and curb lines, which aren't so great, and the rest are off-route trails. And when you try to expand this network, you get the usual kinds of criticisms. There's this thing called winter, maybe you've heard of it. Get insurance and pay taxes, and then we can talk about bike lanes. And that our city is way too spread out to bike anywhere. But the one comment that is made possibly most frequently is no one rides bikes in Sudbury. And it's a ridiculous thing to say to somebody who rides a bike, but they say it anyway. And if you say, but I ride a bike, then they'll say, well, you're the only one and you're crazy. Or they'll say, or you could say, you know, more people would ride bikes. Fact is, I got tired of hearing it, and I went out to prove it correct. So here's a couple of folks not riding bikes in Sudbury. This is taken on my lunch break. You know, this is a main spot. This is Elgin Street. There's actually a proposal to build a greenway there. People don't ride bikes in the winter in Sudbury either. Young people don't ride bikes in the winter in Sudbury. This is in my neighborhood, and you can see there's not a lot of room to share with vehicles. I also work with people who don't ride bikes throughout the year. Even though we've got a bike room in the basement of our building, it never has bicycles in it, of course. You can see this is going through a parking lot, and it's not necessarily plowed or maintained for cyclists, but nevertheless, people ride invisible bicycles there as well. The thing about the invisible bikes is that some of them do leave trails when you're going along, so you can often see evidence of the invisible bikes. The hard part is finding their invisible bike lanes, and that's what my blog is about. This is Invisible Bike Lanes of Sudbury.tumblr.com. I've been documenting these folks and trying to promote and publicize the people riding invisible bikes. They ride downtown, they ride in the outlying areas, on our commercial arterials, mostly on the side. Most of our invisible bike lanes are on the sidewalks. And that's a 6-lane road with almost no property fronting onto it. They don't always look like your typical cycling advocates. These aren't always the people who come out to public meetings. And because of that, they're kind of invisible as well. I'm just watching the timing, and I thought I'd be way ahead. This guy is. This is Patrick, and he looks like a cyclist, right? So he's quite visible. And people know that there's that crazy guy who's got a camera on his head, and he wears reflective stuff, and he's a cyclist. But the other people that ride invisible bikes, they're just about as invisible as their bicycles themselves. So the idea here was to, you know, if you want to argue with people and say, but people do ride bikes in Sudbury, it's really difficult to prove it. You go out and take pictures of people riding bikes, and that's not a headline, that's not news. Man rides bicycle. But man rides invisible bicycle, that's news. So after collecting a number of photographs, they ride with their friends too. After collecting a number of photographs and posting these on the blog, I collected about 100 or so and decided to publicize it and put the word out to news media, and it actually got some pickup in the media. And I was able to go on to our local, see, police ride translucent bicycles. You sort of forget that they're on a bike, they sort of forget they're on a bike, but it's a little bit more visible than anybody else, but it's still kind of iffy. So I actually got to be on CBC radio and Radio Canada did an interview with me on television. This is an example of one of our major arterial roads, the Kingsway. It's got a huge boulevard on one side that you could totally put a visible bike lane on, except for those poles. This guy's a king on the Kingsway. That's the way I put it. So if you go to invisible bike lanes, invisiblebikelane.sudbury.tumblr.com, you can see the invisible bicycles. You're getting a treat here. These are the visible shots. These were all taken during my lunch hour on one day last year. So they're absolutely there, and they're absolutely everywhere, even though city staff like to ignore it. So here's an example of some of the publicity I got. Sudbury photo blogger aims to highlight need for cycling infrastructure. I don't think this would have happened if I just wrote a letter or just took pictures or just counted or released a bunch of data. But if you try to find a creative way to highlight the situation, it gets played. And the result is, in our new council's term, they earmarked $800,000 a year for cycling infrastructure, and this year they committed to hiring an active transportation coordinator. So Adam's not here, I don't think, but if he gets bored of Thunder Bay, he can come over to Sudbury. That'd be pretty cool. So you can find my stuff at SudburyMoves.ca, Facebook.com/SudburyMoves. I'm on Twitter as West End Matt, and my email address is there, and you can contact me if you're interested. And I think that's about it.